I was very privileged to be one of the 5 judges reading these stories. And I'm very lucky in that I get to announce the winners. I feel the sense of honor very strongly. I want to thank Kwani for their foresight, for their questioning, for the insistence and the curiosity and the dissatisfaction that they always show with whatever the status quo has shown itself to be. They're always looking for the new thing, the unsaid thing, the thing we forgot to talk about last time. And in opening up this space of imagining and telling and stories, they again showed that there is a space in which we have not fully captured our Kenyan reality, and there are still manifold stories untold. I'm very, very grateful to have been able to read them, and I'd like to take this opportunity on my own behalf and on behalf of the other judges to say how deeply we appreciate what it is you have given us. Thank you. We considered a lot of things in trying to figure out by what scale of criteria, by what matrices, through what lens should we decide one story better than another. Because on some level, it is really quite an usurpation of power and authority. Who died and made you write a God? Why should you be able to say this story is better than the other story? So we were very careful to put ourselves through a ringer of indices, to ask ourselves, what is the integrity of this story? Does the story finish? Has the author treated their characters with care and consideration? Are they credible? Are they believable? Do they know anything about plotting? Do they know anything about pacing? What is the descriptive character of these places that they are showing us? Are they, most importantly, able to take us and place us, almost despite ourselves, in this place that they're talking about? Are we in the story? Are we helpless against it? Are we rooting for or against any given character? It was rough. We did it, and then we redid it, and then we redid it, and then we argued, and then we discussed, and then we talked, and then we rethought it, and then we re-ranked them, and then we did it again. So over and over and over. I want to assure the writers of the 65 stories that we were allowed to read that, if nothing else, here, in that panel of judges, you found a loving audience. We appreciated so much your courage in putting forth these things for judgment. It is a frightening thing. It is a traumatic thing. We get it. We've all been there. If you've done it right, if you've written correctly, there is a small, vulnerable, hurting piece of you in there, in that story. And I know how terrifying it is to think that this is being held up for judgment. We took that into account, and we salute you, and we salute your courage, and we say again, we are privileged to have walked in the pathways of your mind. Thank you very much. Because we are also all writers, we had to think very deeply about our position relative to the stories we were judging. Because very often, the level of talent displayed, the care taken, the attention that was really visible, we had to ask ourselves, yeah, so could I have done that? And therefore, who am I to tell between them? And a lot of the time, we were forced to say, no, not necessarily, but we've read good enough examples, many enough examples of the kinds of things we're talking about to have a place to stand on to judge, because we had to judge. Our preference would really have been to be able to give everybody the prize because we loved everything so much, but we had to make some distinctions. But on this note, I want to tell everyone, everybody who discovered in themselves through this process, all 500 and plus of you, that you are writers, do not take notice of what we say. Write anyway. You are writers because you think you're writers, and that's all the authorization you're ever going to need. Write. We need it. It improves us and grows us and develops us and enlightens us to read what you have to say. Please keep writing, all of you. I was asked to say a bit about what the judges were looking for, and as I've mentioned already, we tried to utilize an array of indices and matrices and scales of evaluation so that no one story was being judged by just any one thing. We thought about the range, We thought about the multiplicity of settings and characters. We considered the kind of genres that were represented. There were matatu stories, there were campus stories, there were rural stories, there were urban stories, there were rural to urban migration stories, there were love stories, there were all kinds of stories, and we tried to make sure that there was a way in which we could consider all of them in their various strengths relative to each other. I want to take just a few seconds to talk about the 5 finalists. This was really, really tough, because I think on any given day, anybody would be able to wage a fairly rigorous argument as to why any of these should have been first. So this was hard. And in the end, we had to reach really deeply into, some stringent writerly qualities, such as the integrity of the writing, the soul of the writer, the presence of the voice on the page. It was hard, actually, because they all had that. Story number 5. Number 5 struck me as a story of profound significance. Number 1, it would never have occurred to me. Number 2, the way that Kwani phrased the call for its stories made a certain kind of story predominant. In fact, it made it so predominant that it became a little bit predictable, because it's a hard title not to say certain things in relation to. This story did that. This story completely surprised everyone. This story was fresh and amazing, and nobody had ever thought of that. And the end, especially if, like me, you have ever read the philosopher Giorgio Agamben, Homo Sacer, about certain mysteries and the quality of being in those who get chosen to live and those who get chosen to die, and why, you will find The Kenya I Live In by Benjamin O. Ikao, which is a story about a chicken. From the point of view of a chicken, it is utterly philosophical, and I am so proud to be able to say that we loved it. Mr. Mr. Benjamin. Mr. Ikao, read this story. Read this story. Thank you. Thank you. Good job. Number 4, there have been many attempts to engage the specter of HIV and AIDS in our midst, and we have bent our collective imagination towards it. We have deployed our most expressive and lyrical attempts towards trying to articulate what this thing means in our midst. But until we read this story, we hadn't realized that this idea could be told with the simplicity and the beauty of a child's view. Someone who didn't know exactly what was going on, but who was profoundly, profoundly affected, and who watched this somewhat mystifying world of adults unfolding in front of her, trying to make sense of it. We feel very privileged to be able to say that at number 4 is Brave New Worlds by Renee Akitelek Boya. Thank you for that. I want to say on my own behalf that in the number 3 story, the author gave us an account of what is involved in the burning of charcoal, such that I have never read anything like this before. It was lyrical. Everybody, read this story and note especially how you can make poetry out of the burning of charcoal. It's a very sweet, sad story about really the decline of a family that used to be middle class and then wasn't, and the ways in which it slipped further and further and further into its own helplessness, and of the strange tangle of coincidences that make those to whom we owe the most very often our victims. This was a beautiful story. This is The Activist by Wilson Kiriungi Wahome. Congratulations. And number 2, I must say, you have never read quite so dysfunctional a family as this. This was a marvelous, marvelous work of constructing a set of people that was so alarming, really, and so dysfunctional, and really so sad in their depravity that despite yourself, you find yourself feeling sorry for them. It is an amazing thing for a writer to be able to make deeply, deeply unpleasant characters somehow attractive, vulnerable. And the voice of the author herself, this is not a nice woman, okay? This is a rich, spoiled girl who is just unthinking of anybody else. And yet, the author managed to show, purely by the structure of the story, the vulnerability of this person. Anyone who can humanize our politicians and make us begin to look really deeply and with sadness and understanding at the choices that they have, these poor things. It's a terrible desolation of a moral desert that they inhabit. I salute the person who made this visible and real. This is called All in the Family by Brenda Mukami Kunga. Oh, well done. This is beautiful. This is good stuff. Good for you. Finally, the winner. Honestly, this story, it kind of blew everybody away. There's a phrase that Pasalalo, who couldn't be here tonight, there's a phrase he uses. He says, the game changer. The story, which when you read it, means that every other story you read after that is going to feel different to you. It's going to be read through a different prism. That you yourself, after having read this story, are going to be a different person. That is the highest purpose of a work of art, to achieve that transformation. I do not know how many writers currently living can deal simultaneously with thoughts and concepts from Hitler's Mein Kampf, I mean a block quote, and also Arundhati Roy, also a block quote, who can deal with our messy, interracial, pluralist, confused, emergent, dynamic, contemporary self, who can take you through Westlands so minutely you know exactly the street corner that you were standing on, who can take you from there to Parklands, who can take you from Westlands and Parklands to Eastleigh, who can then take you from Westlands, Parklands, Eastleigh, and an afternoon at 20th Century Cinema to Times Square, in the same sentence, in the same thought, the seamless weaving back and forth of places and people and contexts and scales. Okay, yeah, we're blown away. It grounds us in the specificity of our being here. Anybody who knows Nairobi will feel it. Anybody who knows anything about the outside world will feel it. Anybody who has ever fallen in love with a person they shouldn't, the person that horrifies your parents, the lines that we have that say, no, you don't talk to those people, that you certainly don't bring them home. Anybody who has ever noticed these divisions that we build in our societies, because you know, we black people are over here, those brown people are over there, those white people are over there, you're not supposed to interact. And everybody who has ever known that all that prohibition does is build desire. You want that. You do. Anybody who has ever felt that, who has ever looked across those borders and thought, I wonder what these people are about, and felt drawn. This story, you know what? It does all that. It does this with a fluency and a wit and a humor and a kind of knowingness that really, really floored us. And in the middle of all this complexity and all this philosophy and all this profundity, you know what? It's a love story about these two people. I won't tell you the ending. Yes. No, yeah, read it. The number one, which we didn't know about before, goes to Farah Aidid Goes to the Gulf by Mehul Gohil. Congratulations. What a work.